right, hello sports fans, and thanks for tuning into the Press Box. It's Tuesday night. That means it's sports talk time. I'm your host, Jeff Richardson. I'm joined tonight by Ty Reynolds, the usual suspect. I know he enjoys that. And we have a newcomer tonight, Kenny Sharp from Dirty Owls. Nice to see you, Kenny.
All right, thanks for having me.
Kenny, maybe you'll be a suspect one day.
One of the usual suspects. All right, let's start our discussion tonight about the Atlanta Knights, the hockey team. They had lost 3 of their previous 30 games until they went on a road trip this weekend and dropped 3 in a row. What's going on?
Jeff, at the beginning, we knew last week that this was going to be a brutal road trip coming up with several big games coming up. But what really frustrates me here is that when you sit there and you look at this Knights club, you see that they can dominate a game. They'll sit there and they'll double and even sometimes triple the amount of shots on goal against another team. However, sometimes you see them still losing these games. They'll lose a shootout, or they'll blow a big lead as they did Sunday night. I mean, what were they up, 4-0 or 4-1, and they ended up losing.
3-0 inside 5 minutes, I think.
You just cannot afford to do that, especially on the road. You don't get many leads like that, and you cannot afford to do that, especially when you have a stretch this difficult.
Yeah, a lot of teams in the IHL have that problem, though, where they play real well at home. And the travel situation in the IHL where teams spend a weekend or a whole weeks on the road to save some money, and they run into real problems there. So the Knights won't return home to the Omni until, I guess, the first week in March.
Yeah, I think March 4th is their next home game. So they are in Salt Lake City this weekend, right? A game Friday night. I think it's on TV. I think we probably have a graphic later that we'll show for that.
And that's a game that they should win.
It is. Yes. Salt Lake is not a very good team. They're last place in their division. The Knights, it's hard to understand how they struggle so much. I think Coach Ubriaco gets concerned about their lack of killer instinct. They'll get up by 3 or 4 goals and then just let it slip away in the third period. But an interesting sidelight I noticed in the paper, they've given up the fewest third period goals of any team in the league. So.
And that caught me by surprise because it seems that every time I'm watching this team, they're giving up a big lead. So I don't know, maybe it's me. Maybe I shouldn't watch them.
I'm sure they'd probably appreciate that. Speaking of hockey, before we change the subject, we have a graphic where we're going to show some of the upcoming games, and I think they'll put that up now. Speaking of the Knights, they played Friday night at Salt Lake City at 9 p.m.
Wait a minute, that's a basketball.
Okay, well, we have the wrong one up. Let's take that one down and move on.
There we go.
Okay, now we have the right one up. Knights at Salt Lake City Friday at 9, as you can see on Sports South. Speaking of Olympic hockey, the U.S. tied today, and they play on TV against Canada Thursday. And Sweden on Saturday at 2 o'clock, CBS. That should be a pretty good game. I think Sweden is probably favored to win the gold medal in this tournament.
After the Russian performance the other day, I think Sweden would be the favorite. The Russians have 19 of the 22 players from the last Olympic Russian hockey team are in the NHL now. So it's a really inexperienced team, and they were really drilled by Finland the other day. Yeah,
they've really fallen from grace. It's hard to understand how they've done that. We had a Central Red Army team come over and play the Knights a couple of weeks ago, and they looked pitiful.
Yeah, the Knights actually not a real physical team in the IHL, and really out-hit the Russians, and I think the Russians got maybe 12 shots on goal the entire game.
All right, let's move on, Ty, to your favorite subject, which is college hoops. Georgia Tech's been a little bit inconsistent lately. What's going on over there on North Avenue?
Right now they're on the high end of a roller coaster. I mean, this is a team last year that's doing the same thing as they're doing this year. They're going out and they're losing games they have no business losing, and now they're going out winning games that they have no business winning. Here it is, another perfect example, going over there to Chapel Hill and winning at North Carolina. But this Tech team lives and dies with that three-point shot. Kenny, this team shot over 50%. They shot like 51% three-pointers. Carolina shot something like 57% from the three-point area. The thing is, Tech took about 30 shots to Carolina's 14 or so. And so Vincent hit 8 of them. He was red hot. And when they do that, Tech's going to be a hard team to beat. They live and die by that thing against very good teams.
Well, it's a 20-foot jump shot. And if you're not hitting it, and you live and die by it, it's going to be real hard to win if you don't have anything else to go to. Forrest is starting to gotten into a little better shape inside, so he's providing a little bit of offense inside, but they really don't have anyone else to go to inside other than Forrest. And Moore is a very inconsistent player from the three-point line, and he just continues to fire him up there. So I think a lot Tech season depends on the play of Martise Moore and, to a lesser extent, maybe Drew Barry down the stretch.
I think Drew Barry is very important here because he's the man I think that has to handle the basketball and be the point guard. You want to use him at that position so you can have Travis Best, who I think is one of the better off-shooting guards in the country. You want to be able to let him roam around, get off some screens from those big people inside and get open three-point jump shots, and that's a guy that can really kill you. If you get a guy like Travis Best open, and then you get three-point productivity out of Vincent, Georgia Tech is going to be a hard team to beat because Forrest, I think, is a man. He's a player, and he's always going to be able to get his points inside if you have to sit there and spread your defense out a little bit. I think the play of Berry is going to be very important, along with getting consistency from Vincent, because Forrest and Best are two quality players. You can count on them.
Did you guys find it interesting that Dean Smith pulled some of those starters out the other day with a big lead? What's going on in his mind?
He always seems to do that.
Who
I mean,
knows?
this is a guy that will say, he pulled Michael Jordan out when he had him in the NCAA tournament years ago when he blew that game to not a very good Indiana club. I remember years ago in the Omni. So,
Yes.
so if he's going to pull Michael Jordan out, he'll pull anyone out. He just likes to play a whole lot of people, and so that's a strategy. He's been doing it so long, so he's not going to change.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever been able to figure out Dean Smith's substitution patterns. I think the best five he has are Montross, Wallace, and Stackhouse, and he'll continue to play Reese and Calabria and Salvadori because they're upperclassmen, instead of putting his best five on the floor. He's done the same thing for years. He almost tried to give away the NCAA tournament title game last year to Michigan when he put a couple seniors in the game with about 8 minutes to go. 3 straight possessions, they didn't get a shot at the basket when Michigan made a little run at him. Dean Smith is not one of my favorite coaches. He continues to get quality players, but only 2 NCAA tournament championships with all the talent he's had.
Great talent.
That's a
I
good
agree
point.
with that.
It is hard to argue with his overall record, though, I guess.
Yep.
And you get a building named after you, you got to be doing something right. Let's take a time out. I want to remind everybody this is a live show, and you're welcome to call in at 873-6713, and we'd like to take some questions if you have any. Ty, get back to Tech a little bit. How many wins do they need to make the NCAA tournament?
Right now, I think they have 13, and I think they need 4 more. They got 5 games left. They got North Carolina State, which they should win. They got Wake Forest, which I think they should win. But then you never do know with this
You don't
team.
know with Tech. You really don't.
And then they got a game up at Charlottesville. That's been traditionally a tough place for them to play. And then they have a game down at Florida State, where Florida State came into Atlanta and beat Tech earlier this year. And then finally they finish out the season at home with Clemson. I think Tech should win 3 out of 5 of those games. I think 16 wins they can get in the tournament. I think one more they're a shoo-in because their out-of-conference schedule is just brutal with clubs like Michigan and Temple and St. John's, Vanderbilt. I would mention Georgia, but they're going to have a losing record, I think.
I think Tech with 16 will get in because of the quality wins over Temple and 2 against North Carolina, home and away wins. 16 should get them in the tournament, I think.
Now, what if they have 15 wins, they go to the ACC tournament and win 2 or 3 games there?
And then they still have a
Yeah,
shot, I think.
then I think, if they get 2 wins in the ACC tournament, I think they're going to get in.
I'll tell you, if they have 15 wins, though, and they go to the ACC tournament and lose in the first round to Duke or Virginia, they're going to be really on the bubble.
I think that'll be an NIT bid.
All right. Speaking of the ACC, how many teams are going to make the field this year?
I really think it's almost a done deal. I think they're going to get 6 teams in. It's not a question of who's going to be in, it's a question of who's not. And that's going to be Florida State, North Carolina State, and Clemson. Everyone else, I think, will be in.
Well,
Those are the only 3 that are out right now, then.
Right.
Wow.
I
Okay.
think they'll get 6 teams in.
I don't know about that. I think it's a little bit of a down year for the ACC. Duke and Carolina are always going to be strong. It's the middle teams in the ACC that last year were so good. The Florida State was real good last year, and they're down this year. Wake Forest had Rodney Rogers last year. Down a little bit this year, not quite the same team they were last year. And
But then
Tech
Wake Forest
also.
they swept Duke this year. They got some quality wins also.
Well, they're a team like Tech.
yeah,
They can beat Duke, and they can lose to Clemson. So
yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about our buddies up the road in Athens here, the UJ Bulldogs.
Yeah.
They continue to disappoint me and Utah. I know that. What's going on?
Well, let me ask y'all this because I've hit on this week after week. Kenny, where do you think the problem starts?
I don't know. I think the clock is really running down on Hugh Durham. How many games are left for Georgia this year?
I think something like 5.
Well, that's how many games he has left, I would say.
Yeah.
And they don't have a real leader. You can't tell me one guy on that team that is the point guard and is the leader of that team, a guy that distributes the ball, a guy can, Durham wanted to go inside this year. He wanted to use Claxton as his main guy in the middle, and this guy just doesn't get the job done. If he gets fouled, he's a terrible foul shooter.
He's a bricklayer. This guy will sit there and hum him off the backboard, and then it won't even hit the rim. It'll hit the floor.
Yeah, it's just awful watching that guy shoot free throws. He doesn't have any real moves inside. It's almost like Shaq, but he's smaller than Shaq. He's like Shaq, whereas Shaq doesn't have any real moves, but he's so big and powerful, he still gets the job done. Claxton still doesn't get the job done, even as big as he is.
Yeah.
Shaq is sort of like a mean guy who's going to go out and do his thing. And,
Yeah,
and
Claxton
Charles
doesn't
likes to hang back and just stay loose.
No, he doesn't have a real killer instinct about him
Unmotivated.
at all.
He's not as nearly as good as an athlete either. I don't think he's nearly as quick. Jeff, what do you think the problem exists?
Well, I think Kenny hit the nail on the head. I think Hughes probably worn out his welcome up there. He's gotten into a little rut where he's comfortable with 15 wins a year, and he's comfortable going to the NIT, and without a lot of push from the alumni, he feels that we're all comfortable with that too. So I think Vince Dooley's going to get the message they didn't renew his contract automatically, and I think that sent a message to him. And he got the ill-fated vote of confidence 2 weeks ago, so that tells me that he's gone
Well,
this year.
see, that message was sent before this season.
Right.
So this should have happened this year. He has some quality talent up there, and he hasn't really gotten the job done. It doesn't look like they've gotten any better from the first game till now, this point in the season. They've only got one good win. That was against Kentucky. It'll be a struggle to make the NIT for Georgia right now.
Right.
They won't make the NIT. This team's going to have a losing record. They're still going to have to go on the road and play clubs like Vanderbilt. They're going to have to go on the road and play LSU. I think those will be losses. They got a game at home against Arkansas. They're going to get killed and make 30 turnovers, I think. I think this team will end up at best 13 and 15. And I think right now they're going to end up 12 and 16, maybe 13 and 15.
Yeah, I think you've been listening to Larry too much over there. Wait a minute.
Oh, boy, no, you wait and see. But I think the problem with this club not only exists possibly with the head coach, I think you have to go maybe a step higher. I think Vince Dooley is not with the times when it comes to running athletic programs. I think he's not nearly as aggressive, and I just don't think he has a concept of the changes that are happening right now. Someone who's doing, I think, a great bang-up job is Mike McGee over in Columbia, South Carolina. He goes out there, he plucks a quality basketball coach. He almost gets Bobby Crimmins from here. And then he goes out, tries to get big names in for his football program, tries to get people like Barry Alvarez and folks like that. Well, he goes out there and gets a very quality offensive coordinator from Florida State. I think that's a man who knows what he's doing. Now then you got a guy like Vince Dooley. He's content with mediocrity, and I don't think anyone in the Georgia family should settle for that. I think there's a problem with him, and if Georgia does replace Hugh Durham this year, I don't know if Vince Dooley or all those people up there at Athens can figure out who a good basketball coach is. So if you replace Durham, you may get someone in there worse if he makes a decision. I don't have much confidence in him or the Georgia people up there at all.
Well, you talk about Mike McGee at South Carolina. Do you really think Bobby Crimmins is a quality basketball coach?
I think for the level that South Carolina is on, I think he would be great for the program. I think he would bring him up to another level, then retire. And South Carolina is a type of program, again, I think that would make a quality decision to get another quality coach in after that.
Well, yeah, but you have to, nobody can question Crimmins' ability to recruit. He gets a quality player or two every year at Tech. But his game coaching, I still leaves a little bit to be desired.
But he's gotten you into some Sweet 16s, and I think there's no doubt he could have done the same thing with South Carolina.
Kenny, you mentioned Dean Smith should have won a few more titles with the talent he's had. I would have to say that the Tech fans need to be disappointed with Bobby Crimmins is the fact that they've had some awful big talent over there.
Well, it just seems to be an inconsistency maybe in his preparation. The team always seems to be ready to play Duke. They always seem to be ready to play North Carolina, and they're still capable of throwing in a terrible game where they lose by 20 points at Clemson. Mm-hmm. They don't defend consistently. Teams get the ball inside so easily against Tech. And I think that it all breaks down to practice and coaching and what you go over in practice. And that's got to come back to Crimmins.
All right. Of course, there are some more big basketball games coming up, but I almost forgot something. How many SEC teams in the tournament?
I think it's going to be a real down year and a big struggle for the Southeastern Conference this year. I think 4 at the most. I think you're going to have your given 2, Kentucky and Arkansas. And then Florida's going to be in the tournament, and your final team may be Mississippi State. They've got 15 wins right now. I think State can get 19, maybe 20 wins. I think that'll be good enough to get them in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe Vandy with an outside shot on kind of schedule.
Vandy's 12 and 8. But
yeah, they've got 12 and 8. They have to go on a run.
Yeah, they're going to have to get some big wins. And the people up there in Nashville are already grumbling about John Van Bredikoff.
They were top 20 coming into the season. A little bit of a disappointment up there in Nashville. So.
Yeah, a little bit. But that's a quality program. I think they'll rebound. Van Bredikoff, his father anyway, he has good coaching pedigree. If his father means anything.
All right. Of course, there are some other conferences. Let's talk about some big games. One of them is in the Big 8, Missouri at Kansas, and I know you guys are going to have it on TV at Dirty Owls over on Northside Drive. So let's
you
talk
won't
about
get it locally here. You will be blessed with seeing Georgia and LSU, 2 crummy, disappointing teams this year.
So you need to get out to Dirty Owls on Northside Drive and watch that game.
And that's going to be a big game this year. Missouri is undefeated in the conference, and Kansas has 2 losses. So this is a huge game for Kansas. But you got to be careful if you're both teams. Missouri's got a trip up to Ames, Iowa, to play in the Hilton Coliseum, where that's a difficult place to play. Iowa State's not as good as they were last year, but still, if you don't pay attention, they can knock you off up there. And then Kansas has to go play in Stillwater at Oklahoma State, and it took Woodbury to hit a great three-pointer at the end of the game when they played at Fog Allen Fieldhouse against the Cowboys before their win at home against Oklahoma State. So those are 2 potential upsets. They need to stay focused.
Well, Missouri's a real surprising team. They came into the season unranked. I didn't see them in anybody's polls, and now they're undefeated in the conference. One of their losses was a drubbing by Arkansas. Killed them early in the season, maybe before they were ready, but they impressed me the other night. Played a game on TV. And no, it was this weekend they played, who did they beat? Beat K-State? Oklahoma State.
They beat
Oklahoma State, and they played a real good game. They had a big lead in the first half, almost let it get away, but they did pull it out at the end. Being undefeated in any of the major conferences at this point of the season is really, it's a good accomplishment.
And they played Kansas earlier this year in Columbia and won, so that's a good club.
All right, I think we have our first phone call in weeks here. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, guys. This is Tina from Dirty Owls. You guys are doing a great job. I just had a question. What you guys thought about the coach from Temple, John Chaney, if that was a fair punishment?
That's a good question. Anybody?
I'll hit on that. First of all, I think that Temple has to be very embarrassed. And if I'm the NCAA, I'm kind of anxious to see what the conference is going to do. I don't think the 1-game suspension is enough. I would like to see them. I really don't want to see Temple hurt as a club because they need their coach, and you're getting here in February or late in the season. No, where I'd like to see Chaney really feel it is in the old pocketbook. I'd like to see him get slapped with about a $20,000 fine in cash, and then you
that
probably
wouldn't hurt
won't
him.
see
Bill
him.
Cosby would just pay that.
Yeah, the school would pay it, or
Yeah.
Cosby would pay it.
Well, then maybe you just need to hit them up for more, but something needs to happen with that. You need to take a major step and let people know that you cannot allow things like that to happen in your conference. The Atlantic 10 has to be very embarrassed as well.
Well, this isn't the first time that Chaney's freaked out like this. You know, he had an incident with Calipari 4 years ago where he pushed him in the middle of a game. I don't know if ESPN was showing the clips of it, where the referees got between them and Chaney actually took a shot at Calipari. But you know, Chaney talks about don't pick on the refs or what are you talking to the refs because they did a good job. Well, maybe Calipari doesn't think they did a very good job. Mm-hmm. I don't see where it's his business to rush into Calipari's press conference and start a scene like that. I don't know that a 1-game suspension is really. He could have been given more here, but you're right. It would hurt the team more than it would hurt him. Maybe something out of his pocketbook would hurt a little bit more. Send a message, maybe.
And another thing that I want to make a comment on about this is that there's a pretty good coach over there in Bloomington that has made a living off of this and has won several championships, and that's Bob Knight. And certainly, I'd like to see John Chaney sit there and try that with Bobby Knight and see what happens. You just can't. That's if Calipari or Bob Knight or whoever wants to be that way, that's their own business. And if someone doesn't like it, then the NCAA should step in. But Knight's been doing it year after year, and apparently he's been winning championships as well. So I just think John Chaney is totally wrong here, and someone needs to step in and give him a bigger penalty.
All right. Well, thanks for the call, Tina, and keep watching.
No problem.
All right. Let's talk about Temple. They got a game against Louisville. What's going to happen? Is Chaney going to miss this one now? Is this his suspended game?
He misses tomorrow's game against St. Bonaventure.
Yeah. So, Louisville, I think, is a team that is just loaded with a lot of talent and speed. And they're a team that moves up and down the floor, a lot of transition. And to me, I think Louisville is going to be a very dangerous team to get a hold of in the tournament. They're, number 5 in the country? Yeah. I think that's an honest ranking. I think they're one of the top 5 teams in the country right now. They're playing very well.
I absolutely agree with that. I think they could be rated higher. I really like them to be a big force in the tournament this year. And I think this is a game that Temple could look past. They have the rematch with UMass on Thursday night. And I think the entire Temple team will be looking ahead to that game. This Louisville's a non-conference game. It's not really that important to either team. But Louisville playing in the Sun Belt Conference, this is a big game for them because there's not that many great teams in the Sun Belt Conference. They want a big win against a really good team, a quality team, a top 10 team, before they go into the tournament. They're not really going to face too much in their conference before the NCAA tournament starts.
I agree.
All right, back to the phones. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I had a hockey question, please.
All right.
This is directed for Keith Sharp. It's a 2-part question. First part was, does he know when the Rangers last won up? And the second part would be, how's he think they're going to do this year?
All right, I think we missed the second question.
I think I know the question.
All right.
Rangers last won the Cup in 1940. Anybody that follows the Rangers knows that.
Let me guess, are you a Rangers fan?
Yes, I am.
All right, then.
And as to how they're going to do this year, I think that was the second part of the question. I never make a prediction on the Rangers for the playoffs, no matter how good they look during the regular season, because I believe in history. But I'm always optimistic about their chances. I think they have as strong a team as they've ever had there since I've been following them. And Keenan's the best coach they've ever had. I think their best chance to win would be this year before Messier maybe gets a little bit older. He's 33 years old. That's pretty old for a hockey player. He's unquestionably their emotional leader, and I think this will be the year if they win.
All right, they got Brian Leach. That's probably one of the better defensemen in the league, too. He was
Yes.
injured all of last year?
He missed 40 games last year, or 45 games last year, and Leach is probably the most important player on the team, while Messier is the emotional leader. Leach is definitely the quarterback on their power play, and he gets 30 minutes a game. So, he's undoubtedly their most important player.
Okay.
A healthy Brian Leach will go a long way toward the Rangers' success in the playoffs.
All right, back to the phones. Caller, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, do you think Dean Smith is a better recruiter than he is a coach? I've heard that John Wooden has said that had he had his material, he would have won about 10 national championships. Just like to hear your comment. Thank you.
Ty, you want to go first?
Who do you say, Dean?
Dean Smith.
Okay. Well, first of all, when you look at this, when you look at some of the teams, the team that really amazed me was the club that had Sam Perkins and Michael Jordan, and never won a national championship. When
Brad
you have
Doherty
that
was on that team, too.
Yeah, and Doherty.
And
yeah.
Kenny Smith, I think, was a freshman on that team.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean, what he did win a national championship with this first time, he had Michael Jordan and James Worthy on that club.
Perkins was on the team, too.
And again, you had to depend on, well, it was a close game in the final against Georgetown, and Georgetown had to make a mistake at the end of the game to give North Carolina that game. I never will forget that. I just don't understand what it is about Dean Smith. Maybe he likes a little bit of a killer instinct as well. But with the talent that he's had, I certainly think he should have won more national championships, just looking at the players that he has in the pros.
Well, last year's national championship game, Michigan had a chance to tie or go ahead with a three-pointer on the last possession when Weber called that timeout that he didn't have. So he could have lost that one, too. But you have to look back to that '84 game. That team was absolutely loaded, and they lost that Indiana team led by Ted Kitchell, I think, was the best player on that team. And
and in 1983, up at the Carrier Dome on Palm Sunday, they were drilled by the Georgia Bulldogs, led by Vern Fleming.
So, but getting
So
back
he is
to
a great
Dean,
recruiter. He is a great
well,
recruiter,
look at
not
the
a good
players.
coach.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that
no,
what
I didn't say that. I would say that he's a great coach in practice because those kids come out of there and go to the NBA, and you can see how many NBA All-Stars he's produced.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids know their fundamentals when they come out. They're excellent when it comes to the technique and the actual playing of the game. It's his game coaching is the thing that gets me. His substitution patterns. He's got this kid Stackhouse now, who is an absolute stud. He's the best guy on their team. I'm telling you, this guy is more productive than Montross, and he's playing maybe 20 minutes a game, so he can get his Calabria or whatever his name is out there, to run around because he's a senior. And this, to me, and Brian Reese also, who's been ineffective, slowed by an injury a little bit, a good player, but this Stackhouse is a better player. Let's just put it the way it is. Stackhouse is a better player than Reese. He should be getting the bulk of the minutes. This guy can average 20 points a game right now in the NCAA and the ACC.
Now, I want to get an opinion on in here, and that is with the new TV deals coming out. When you look at these basketball conferences and how they're progressing and how they're going downhill, I think the Southeastern Conference as a whole is going downhill. They just seem to have a whole bunch of lousy teams year after year, and they get drilled in their out-of-conference games. And then here it is, you have conferences like the Big Ten and the Big East. Well, the Big East, let's scratch them. The ACC really been making big-time moves with their programs. And now you have these television deals. If I'm CBS, who just signed this big deal with the Southeastern Conference that's going to include basketball, I've got to wonder what they're really getting into because of the leadership that you have here. And at Jeff, I just don't think that a lot of athletic directors and a lot of people actually care about the programs.
I hope you're referring to basketball, obviously.
Right, about basketball.
Okay. Well, certainly, I think that's probably a given. The SEC is not a basketball conference, and they don't want to
Never
pretend
has
to
been.
be.
It never has been.
Football is the gravy, and they're going to stick with what they do best, I think.
Well, if you look at history of programs, and the only school really in the SEC that has a tremendous basketball history is Kentucky. Mm-hmm. You don't remember great games that were ever played in the Coliseum at Georgia. Can we
No.
remember one? Maybe the Kentucky game this year is the last one I can remember. It's just not, they don't pour a lot of money into the programs, it seems, in the SEC. Everything is geared toward football, and I think it's basically the region. This is a football-crazy region that we live in here, and basketball suffers because of it.
There's just so much tradition for football in the SEC that, like I said, I just don't think they want to even care about basketball.
I think there's a lot of money and exposure to be made off of that. I would really like to see changes made in the Southeastern Conference. For years, I was waiting for them to somehow get some more television exposure. I mean, the only exposure you see them right now is their good old 10 o'clock Tuesday night game on ESPN, and that's about it. I mean, you don't see them get on national TV hardly anywhere else unless Kentucky plays Syracuse, and then you don't get to see that here in Atlanta anyway.
Well, when was the last time that ESPN carried a Southeastern Conference basketball game that didn't feature Arkansas or Kentucky?
Right.
Good question.
Unless they have that conference contract where you play at 10 o'clock on Tuesday night.
Or maybe LSU when they had Shaq.
Right.
All right, we mentioned the new TV deal for the SEC, and I think the ACC just signed one. How are things going to shape up? What's going to happen next?
I think right now that the Big East and CBS probably already have something wrapped up, and I think the Big East is going to get a whole lot of money. I think you may see them get a deal that's around $100 million. That's simply because of population, and also I think that CBS needs someone to play on Sundays. They may ask some Big East clubs to take the extra money and move games to Sunday afternoon.
Well, the Big East is down in basketball right now, and their Saturday games are not carried locally. They had Georgetown was playing this weekend against Providence or somebody at 2 o'clock. The game was not to be carried locally because of the local
Well, I was
Raycom or
talking about
JP.
football.
Oh, you're talking about
Yeah, I was
football?
talking about football.
Well, they're talking about adding Virginia Tech, those Big East schools that are playing football only. They added them to the basketball conference also.
Right. And that would really hurt the Atlantic 10 if they did that.
Yes, it would.
All right, well, I think they're going to wrap us up here. Before we go, I think we have a graphic with some upcoming sporting events that you'll probably want to tune in for. If the guys will go ahead and put that up in the back. There you go. You see the Daytona 500 coming up. A couple of guys have been killed here this last week, which doesn't bode too well for that.
Nope.
And men's figure skating in the Olympics is going to be Thursday night. I think it's probably going to show some at nighttime, but it's going to be live at 1 o'clock if you want to see that. I want to thank our sponsors, Sports Authority, Dirty Owls at Northside Drive, of course, which we're going to be there after the show if you want to join us. And our other sponsor is the Atlanta Knights. I almost forgot it, but they're out of town. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be here next week, same time.